Is this some kind of diversity stunt? Lieutenant Thompson barked, his voice cutting through the morning formation. He wasn't looking at his fellow Rangers. His glare was fixed on the young woman in clean fatigues trying to keep up with equipment checks among the battle-hardened soldiers. The voice was sharp, dripping with the kind of arrogance that only comes from being part of the elite and believing you've earned the right to judge who belongs. Captain Jessica Chen didn't look up from her gear inspection. She was 32 years old, and the simple act of organizing her field equipment deserved more of her attention than the group of Tier 1 operators standing around the training area. She could feel their presence, the sheer physical density of their egos filling the morning air. They were the best of the best, carved from confidence and combat experience, wearing their Ranger tabs and Special Forces patches like armor. The one who had spoken, Lieutenant Thompson, with his perfectly maintained weapon and eyes that missed nothing about appearances but everything about substance, leaned against the equipment table. His combat record was impressive. His leadership scores were high. "I'm talking to you, ma'am." The training exercise, he gestured with his chin toward Jessica's unmarked uniform, was designed for the most elite soldiers in the military.
Yo.
No unit patches, no combat ribbons on her clean fatigues. It looked less like a seasoned operator's gear and more like a fresh recruit's first-day issue. "What about it?" Jessica's voice was quiet, controlled, a steady tone that seemed to cost her no effort. She finally lifted her gaze, her eyes dark brown and alert, holding a calm professionalism that seemed to unnerve the cocky officer. The second operator, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, quieter but equally dismissive, nudged Thompson. "LT, command knows what they're doing." Thompson ignored him. "I'm just curious what kind of experience qualifies someone for this level of training. Some kind of military police background? Maybe you typed up reports at a desk job?" He smirked. "What's your MOS? What do they call you? Paperwork specialist?" The training compound, a sprawling facility hidden in the mountains of North Carolina, had been buzzing with pre-exercise preparations. Now a pocket of tension was expanding from Jessica's corner. Other operators who knew the routine, the constant vetting and security clearances required for this level of training, shot curious glances at the unmarked woman. They'd seen female soldiers before, but never someone so deliberately anonymous in such an exclusive program. Jessica took a slow sip from her water bottle. She placed it down with a steady hand.
"I have some experience."
"Some experience," Thompson mimicked, drawing the words out mockingly. "Experience doing what? Diversity seminars? Equal opportunity briefings?" The condescension was thick enough to be a physical force. He was testing her, prodding her, enjoying what he perceived as complete intellectual and physical superiority. He and his unit were the tip of the spear, the most elite warriors the military had ever produced. This quiet woman was just another box-checking exercise by politically correct leadership. "Something like that," Jessica said, her eyes drifting toward the obstacle course where other operators were conducting movement drills. This infuriated Thompson.
He expected submission, or at least acknowledgement of his superiority.
He was getting nothing but calm indifference. "You know, we don't appreciate it when the brass tries to social engineer our units. This isn't sensitivity training. Real operators earn their place through blood, sweat, and proven performance in combat zones." He pointed a thick finger at her blank uniform again. "Those clean fatigues tell me you haven't earned anything. I've never seen an operator without unit identification.
Not in any real team.
And trust me, I know them all." Sergeant Rodriguez finally spoke up, his voice cautious. "She's not claiming anything. LT, command assigned her to the exercise." "No," Thompson snapped, his focus locked on Jessica. I want to hear the sob story about how she checked the right demographic boxes to get into a program designed for the best warriors in the world. What's your background, sweetheart? What makes you think you belong with real Tier 1 operators?" Jessica's gaze returned from the training area and settled on Thompson's face. It wasn't a challenging look. It was a look of profound professional patience, as if she were seeing not just this arrogant officer, but countless others who had made the same mistake throughout her career. "It means something," Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper, "to the people who need to know." Thompson laughed, a harsh barking sound. "That's it? That's your war story?" He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "I think you're a fraud. I think you spent your military career filing paperwork and attending gender integration meetings, and now you're here to observe how real soldiers train. The disrespect was palpable now. It hung in the air thick and sour. The equipment maintenance had stopped. The other operators had paused their preparations to watch. The professional atmosphere of the compound had shifted to something uglier. Thompson straightened up, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. He'd exposed what he saw as a fundamental fraud being perpetrated on his elite unit. He turned to Rodriguez. See, just another political appointment pretending to be an operator. As he spoke, he made his final critical mistake. He reached out and dismissively flicked Jessica's blank name tape. The touch was casual, almost playful, but for Jessica, it was like crossing a line she had spent years drawing in the sand. The scent of mountain pine and equipment oil vanished, replaced in an instant by the acrid smell of smoke and burning fuel. The chatter of operators became the desperate radio calls of a unit under siege. She wasn't at a training compound anymore. She was crouched in a bombed-out building in Mosul, coordinating the extraction of a trapped team. A young voice crackled through her radio, panic barely controlled. Phoenix Lead, we're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. We need immediate support. She remembered her response, calm and deadly. Copy, Bravo team. Phoenix Lead has eyes on your position. Adjusting fire, stand by for close air support. She had been the voice in their earpieces, the tactical genius who had saved them all. The memory ended with the grateful voice of a team leader, Phoenix Lead. You just saved our asses. We owe you everything. She wasn't just an instructor, she was the instructor, the one they called when other instructors needed to be trained. She blinked, and the training compound returned. Thompson's finger was still touching her uniform. Jessica slowly pulled back, her expression unchanged, but something inside her had shifted. The patient facade remained, but beneath it, an ancient authority had awakened. While Thompson was posturing, enjoying his performance for the silent operators, Master Sergeant Williams was watching from the command building. He had been observing the confrontation with growing concern. Not because of Thompson's attitude, he'd seen plenty of arrogant officers, but because of the woman's reaction, or rather her complete lack of one. Williams had been in special operations for 18 years. He'd seen every type of soldier, every kind of warrior, every species of pretender, but this woman had something different. The way she carried herself, the economy of her movements, the 1,000-yard stare that seemed to see through tactics and strategy to the heart of combat itself. He slipped into the communications room, closing the door softly. He pulled out his secure phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Joint Special Operations Command. If this woman was who he was beginning to suspect she might be, this was about to become a career-ending mistake for Thompson. The phone rang once before a sharp voice answered. JSOC Operations, Colonel Martinez speaking. Colonel, this is Master Sergeant Williams at the Mountain Training Facility. I need you to run a security check on something unusual. We have an unidentified operator at our advanced training exercise. Female, early 30s, no unit markings. Williams, if it's about clearances, that should go through your S2, Martinez started, sounding busy. Sir, Williams interrupted, his voice dropping lower. She's not reacting like a trainee. She's reacting like someone who's run these exercises before.
And sir,
He paused, looking through the window at the confrontation still unfolding. She's not intimidated at all. There was a pause on the other end. What's the operator's name? That's just it, sir. No name tape, but she's got the bearing of someone who's seen real action. The kind of calm you only get from command experience. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. When Colonel Martinez spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Jesus Christ, Williams, don't let anyone leave that compound. I'm making a call. The line went dead. Inside the sterile, secure environment of the Joint Special Operations Command headquarters, Colonel Martinez felt his stomach drop. All the description matched an operator from the most classified training program in military history.
Our Project Phoenix.
He didn't have full clearance for the details, but he knew enough to know this was about to escalate far beyond a training exercise. General Patricia Hayes, the 3-star commander of all special operations training, was in the middle of a classified briefing with component commanders. The room was soundproof, the air thick with strategic assessments and operational planning. Martinez knew the protocol. You do not interrupt the general during a security brief unless it's a matter of national security. He decided this qualified. He walked to the heavy conference room door, took a deep breath, and knocked. A colonel opened it a crack, his face a mask of annoyance. "What is it, Colonel?" "I need to speak with the general." "Priority Alpha." "It can wait," the colonel hissed. "Sir, with all due respect, it cannot." Martinez pushed past him, his heart hammering. All eyes in the room, the most dangerous and capable military leaders in the country, turned to him. General Hayes looked up from the head of the table, her eyes like chips of steel. "Colonel, this had better be World War III." Martinez walked straight to her, his training taking over. He leaned down and spoke in a low, clear voice that only she could hear. "Ma'am, I apologize for the interruption. We have a Phoenix instructor at Mountain Training being confronted by line operators. They don't know who she is." The general's expression didn't change immediately. She was famous for her composure, but Martinez continued, his voice urgent. "Ma'am, they're questioning her credentials, publicly, calling it a diversity stunt." The change was instantaneous and terrifying. The mask of composure didn't just crack, it shattered. The color drained from General Hayes' face, replaced by a dark, thunderous rage that seemed to suck the air from the room. The other commanders flinched back, stunned. Hayes rose from her chair so quickly it screamed back and nearly toppled. Her voice when she spoke was not a shout. It was a low, guttural command that cut through the silence. "Get my helicopter. Get my detail, now." She looked at the other officials at the table. "This briefing is over." Back at the training compound, Thompson had reached his breaking point. Jessica's quiet refusal to acknowledge his authority had become a personal insult. His professional reputation, his identity as an elite warrior, was being challenged by a woman who clearly didn't understand military hierarchy. "All right, sweetheart. I've had enough of this diversity hire act," he said, his voice turning dangerous. He grabbed Jessica's shoulder, his grip firm and threatening. "Time for you to pack up your participation trophy and head back to whatever desk job you came from. You're embarrassing yourself and wasting our time." He was threatening to physically remove a fellow service member from a classified training exercise. A collective gasp went through the watching operators. Rodriguez grabbed his partner's arm. "Thompson, no. What are you doing?" But Thompson was beyond reason. He started to pull Jessica toward the compound exit. It was then that the sound reached them. It wasn't the familiar drone of training aircraft. It was something deeper, more urgent. The distinctive whoop-whoop-whoop of military helicopters approaching at combat speed. Multiple aircraft, moving with purpose. Heads turned toward the sky. 3 Black Hawks appeared over the ridge, flying in perfect formation at a speed that suggested emergency response. They weren't scheduled arrivals. They were a reaction force. The helicopters landed in the compound's main area, their rotors whipping up clouds of dust. Before the aircraft had even touched down completely, figures in dress uniforms were emerging, moving with the kind of synchronized precision that suggested very senior leadership and very serious consequences. Thompson and the other operators froze. They recognized the aircraft, the protocol, the barely controlled urgency of the response. Their blood ran cold. The arrogance and swagger drained from Thompson's face, replaced by sickly pale confusion and the first icy tendrils of pure terror. Out of the lead Black Hawk stepped General Patricia Hayes. Her 3 stars gleamed in the morning sun, but it was her expression that commanded attention, cold, controlled fury that seemed to bend the very air around her. She didn't look at the stunned operators. Her eyes, sharp and implacable, swept the compound until they found the woman still being gripped by Thompson's hand. She walked directly toward them, her stride powerful and uncompromising, her detail forming a protective perimeter. The entire compound had fallen utterly silent. The only sound was the winding down of helicopter rotors and the crunch of the general's boots on gravel. Thompson stood frozen, his hands still on Jessica's shoulder, his mind unable to process the level of response he had just triggered. General Hayes stopped directly in front of them. She looked at Thompson's hand on Jessica's shoulder, and the expression in her eyes was so cold that Thompson snatched his hand back as if he'd been electrocuted. Then General Hayes did something that no one in that compound could have ever predicted. She brought her heels together with a sharp crack, her back ramrod straight in the middle of the dusty training area, surrounded by the smell of aviation fuel and mountain air. The commanding general of all special operations training snapped to the sharpest, most respectful salute Thompson had ever witnessed. It was not the routine salute given to a fellow officer. It was a salute of profound, almost reverent respect, the kind a commander gives to someone who has earned legend status through sacrifice and achievement. "Captain Chen," she said, her voice clear and strong, carrying across the silent compound. "Ma'am, it is an honor. I apologize for the conduct of these operators. They clearly don't understand who they're addressing." She held the salute, waiting. Jessica slowly, gracefully came to attention. She was not as tall as some of the men around her, but she stood with a bearing that commanded the space. She returned the salute with crisp precision. Only then did the general lower her hand. She turned to face Thompson, and the warmth in her eyes was replaced by glacial fury. "Lieutenant," she began, her voice dangerously quiet, "do you have any idea who this officer is?" Thompson, pale and trembling, could only stammer, "No, ma'am. She's an observer, ma'am." "An observer?" The general let out a short, humorless laugh. "Lieutenant, you and your men are standing in a training facility that exists because of this officer's innovations. You are breathing air in a compound that was designed according to her specifications." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in, her gaze sweeping over the assembled operators. "This is not an observer. Lils is Captain Jessica Chen, call sign Phoenix. She is the principal architect of the training program you are currently failing. For those of you too arrogant to understand what that means, let me educate you." She gestured toward the obstacle course and training areas around them. "Every exercise you've run, every tactical scenario you've practiced, every lesson plan that has made you think you're elite warriors, she wrote them, she designed them. She has personally trained over 400 Tier 1 operators, many of whom are still classified at levels you'll never achieve." A wave of shock rippled through the compound. Thompson looked like he had been physically struck. "Captain Chen," the general continued, "holds a master's degree in military science, speaks 6 languages fluently, and has coordinated operations in 12 countries you've never heard of. She has been awarded the Bronze Star with Valor, the Joint Service Commendation Medal, and the Combat Action Badge, none of which she wears because her assignments have been classified above your security clearance." The general took a step closer to Thompson, her voice dropping even further. "She didn't come here as a diversity hire, Lieutenant. She came here as your final examination. This entire exercise was designed to test not just your tactical skills, but your professionalism, your judgment, and your ability to recognize competence regardless of what it looks like." She looked around the compound, her gaze settling on each stunned face. "You have all just failed that test, spectacularly." The general turned back to Thompson. The rebuke, when it came, was not loud. It was a quiet, surgical evisceration. "You wear the uniform of the United States Army. That uniform represents excellence, professionalism, and respect for fellow warriors. Today, you forgot what excellence looks like. You forgot what professionalism means. You forgot that the most dangerous operators are often the ones who don't need to announce their credentials." She looked him up and down with utter contempt. "You will report to my headquarters tomorrow at 0800. Bring your chain of command. Be prepared to explain to a review board why you deserve to continue in special operations." She had just ended his career in elite units. As Thompson stood there broken and humiliated, Jessica Chen finally spoke. She looked not at the general, but at the pale, shattered faces of the operators around her. Her voice was soft, devoid of anger or triumph. "The uniform doesn't make the operator," she said, her brown eyes holding theirs steadily. "Your actions define whether you're worthy of the mission. Competence doesn't announce itself with patches and ribbons. True professionals prove themselves through performance, not posturing." With that, she looked at General Hayes. "Ma'am, shall we proceed with the actual training exercise?" The general smiled, the first genuine expression anyone had seen from her. "Outstanding, Captain. Show them what real excellence looks like." As the compound slowly returned to a more respectful atmosphere, a final memory flashed through Jessica's mind, not of combat, but of her first assignment as an instructor. She was 28, standing in front of a room full of skeptical male operators who thought she was too young, too female, too inexperienced to teach them anything. She had looked at them calmly and said, "I'm not here to prove I belong. I'm here to help you become better than you think you can be. Your job is to decide whether you're professional enough to learn from someone who looks different than you." By the end of that first training cycle, those same operators had nominated her for Instructor of the Year. The fallout from the incident was swift and comprehensive. General Hayes didn't just discipline Thompson and his unit. She used the incident to address a systemic problem: elite operators who had become so focused on superficial indicators of competence that they had lost the ability to recognize real expertise. Within 6 weeks, she instituted a new training protocol called Anonymous Excellence. Instructors would be rotated through units without identification, forcing operators to evaluate competence based on performance rather than appearance, rank, or gender. Thompson was not discharged from the military, but his career in special operations was over. He was reassigned to a training role where his job became teaching junior soldiers about professionalism, respect, and recognizing competence in all its forms. For the next 18 months, he had to tell the story of his failure to every new group of trainees. Captain Chen continued her work as one of the military's most effective instructors, but now with a formal mandate to test and improve the professionalism of elite units. Her methods became legendary throughout the special operations community. About a year later, Thompson encountered Jessica at a base commissary. She was in civilian clothes, looking like any other young professional doing weekend shopping. Their eyes met across the produce section. Thompson approached hesitantly. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Captain Chen, I wanted to apologize again for my conduct that day. There's no excuse for my behavior or my assumptions." Jessica looked at him for a moment, studying his face. She saw genuine remorse there, the kind of humility that only comes from serious consequences and honest self-reflection. "Lieutenant," she said quietly, "the important thing isn't that you made those assumptions. The important thing is whether you learned from the experience." She picked up a container of berries, examining them with the same calm attention she brought to everything. Competence comes in all packages. Leadership means being able to recognize it regardless of what it looks like. She gave him a small nod, then continued with her shopping. The lesson for him was complete. The training facility in North Carolina still operates under the protocols Jessica established, and her story has become required study for all incoming special operations personnel. They call it the Phoenix Test, and it serves as a permanent reminder that true excellence doesn't announce itself. It simply performs when performance matters most. If you were moved by Jessica Chen's story of quiet competence and professional excellence, please like this video, subscribe to Veterans Past Stories for more stories, and share it with someone who understands that expertise comes in all forms. We'll see you in the next one.